good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 16th June, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's conflict with Iran has intensified, sparking global alarm and fears of a broader regional war. Israel initiated a surprise attack on Iran, initially targeting nuclear facilities and military officials to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. But the conflict now appears to be a war of attrition with possible regime change as a goal. Israeli airstrikes on Tehran have disrupted daily life, killing civilians, and Israel bombed Iran's state TV after threatening it would disappear during a live broadcast. Israel claims air superiority over Tehran and has issued an evacuation order, warning residents to leave. The Israeli military said it destroyed more than 120 surface-to-surface missile launchers, a third of Iran's total, and struck 10 command centers. In response, Iran has been firing missiles at Israel, with one attack causing significant damage in Petah Tikva, and at least 8 people have been killed in Israel, raising the toll to 24 RG. Many Israelis are in shock after the country's air defense system failed to intercept Iranian missiles. The conflict has forced many countries in the Middle East to close their airspace. Since its surprise attack on Iran and subsequent strikes by Tehran, Israel has closed its skies to civilian air traffic, leaving its citizens stuck overseas indefinitely. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that regime change could be an outcome of Israel's war against Iran, and told a news conference that his country's military was eliminating Iran's security leadership one after the other. He also said that the recent Israeli attacks have set back Iran's nuclear program by a very long time, but emphasized that more targets remain. The IAEA warns the Israeli conflict with Iran threatens lives and risks nuclear fallout. Amid escalating tensions, the United States President Donald Trump is departing the G7 summit a day early to return to Washington due to the escalating Israel-Iran conflict. He declared that Tehran should be evacuated immediately. Trump encouraged Vice President J.D. Vance and his Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to offer to meet with Iranian officials this week. However, a White House official said he had decided not to sign onto a G7 statement urging restraint from both Israel and Iran, emphasizing market stability and Israel's defense rights. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia introduced a War Powers resolution to prohibit US armed forces from taking direct action against Iran without explicit authorization from Congress or a declaration of war. Trump met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and reiterated that it was a mistake to remove Russia from the G7 in 2014, suggesting that doing so had destabilized the world. He also proposed adding China to the G7. Meanwhile, France shut down the main Israeli company, stands at the Paris Airshow because exhibitors refused to remove attack weapons from display, sparking a furious response from Israel. The Israeli Defense Ministry slammed the move as outrageous and unprecedented. French President Macron stated that an offer was made to get a ceasefire and kickstart broader discussion. Turning to Gaza, the UN Human Rights Chief has condemned the horrifying, unconscionable suffering inflicted by Israel and has urged government leaders to exert pressure on Israel's government and Hamas to end it. Israeli troops opened fire as crowds tried to reach Israeli and US-supported food distribution centers, resulting in the deaths of 34 Palestinians. A group of doctors is pleading with EU leaders to pressure Israel to end its siege. In Iran, Israel has issued Tehran an evacuation order, while Iran is threatening to leave the nuclear weapons treaty. India has started relocating its citizens from Tehran to safer places within Iran, and is working on an evacuation plan. including relocating students from several universities. Pakistan has closed its border. Elsewhere, Jordan has suspended flights, but keeps land crossings with Israel operational. The conflict between Israel and Iran is adding to a polycrisis of threats to global energy security, according to the chief of Malaysian oil major Petronas. Iran and Israel are locked in a dangerous escalation, exchanging missile barrages and airstrikes. Israeli strikes targeted military sites, including the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility, and Iranian state TV was briefly interrupted following evacuation warnings. In retaliation, Iran launched missile attacks on Israeli cities like Tel Aviv and Haifa, causing casualties and intensifying fears of a broader regional conflict. The exchange has resulted in at least 11 deaths in Israel, with retaliatory strikes aimed at military sites in Iran. Palestinian communities have been caught in the crossfire as missile debris landed in the West Bank. Amidst the escalating conflict, a mass exodus from Tehran is underway, as Iranians attempt to flee, facing fuel shortages and disrupted communication services. The UN's Atomic Agency reports no further damage to Iran's nuclear sites. However, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency has warned about potential radiological and chemical contamination at Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility in Natanz. The conflict has also raised questions about Iran's military capabilities, especially after Israeli attacks on Iranian defenses, nuclear sites, and proxy militias. International concern is mounting, yet G7 leaders are divided on issuing a statement calling for de-escalation. French President Emmanuel Macron indicated that Donald Trump was considering a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Donald Trump has urged both Iran and Israel to de-escalate their conflict and called for Iranians to evacuate Tehran. He also stated that Iran wants to discuss de-escalation. Turning to the United States, pressure is mounting to pursue a nuclear deal with Iran to avert a larger war. Senator Tim Kaine introduced a resolution requiring congressional approval before U.S. forces engage in hostilities against Iran, aiming to prevent another forever war. Only the U.S. military possesses the 30,000-pound bomb, and the bomber capable of reaching Iran's best-protected nuclear site, located deep underground. A U.S. envoy reported that the Tel Aviv embassy building was damaged by an Iranian strike. The conflict's repercussions extend beyond the immediate combatants, as approximately 600 stranded Kashmiri students from Tehran universities have been relocated to safer areas in Condemns. The ongoing conflict has also raised concerns about potential economic repercussions, with industry experts examining scenarios, including one in which the price of oil doubles this year. The Group of Seven, G7, summit is underway in Western Canada, where leaders from around the world are gathering amidst rising international tensions, hoping to minimize conflict. Canada assumed the annual rotating presidency of the G7 on January 1, 2005, commemorating the summit's 50th anniversary. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is actively working to keep the summit focused and avoid unnecessary drama. Security for the event is addressing a unique challenge, managing bears and other large wildlife within the Rocky Mountains. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump is present at the G7 summit in Canada, engaging with leaders such as Prime Ministers Shigeru Ishiba of Japan and Keir Starmer of Britain, although his remarks concerning Russia have already sparked controversy. Trump plans to leave the summit a day early, missing meetings with leaders including Anthony Albanese, and will return to the U.S. after the official dinner with G7 leaders on Monday night. His early departure coincides with escalating attacks between Israel and Iran, now in their fifth day, as Israel appeals to the United States for military intervention. Trump's prior interactions with G7 leaders, including the tense standoff with then-German Chancellor Angela Merkel at the 2018 summit, suggests potential for further friction. In other news, Prime Minister Modi is attending the G7 summit and will hold several bilateral meetings. This follows India's Operation Sindoor, which targeted terror infrastructure in Pakistan, and Pakistan occupied Kashmir in response to the April 22 Pahalgam attacks. United States. Domestic affairs in the United States are marked by legal challenges to presidential actions and evolving societal trends. A global study indicates that 54% of Americans now receive their news from social media, surpassing television as the primary source. Immigration raids in Southern California, specifically in Santa Fe Springs and Montebello, have resulted in the detention of US citizens, raising concerns about due process. The American Bar Association is suing to block President Trump's executive orders against law firms, while a U.S. judge declared President Trump's cuts to NIH grants illegal, citing racist and anti-LGBTQ motives. The Trump Organization is venturing into the tech market with a new smartphone targeting conservative consumers. Purdue Pharma $7.40 billion. Opioid settlement has garnered widespread support from US states, with funds earmarked for victim compensation and addiction treatment programs. A U.S. senator introduced a bill aimed at curbing President Trump's authority to initiate war with Iran. Furthermore, a federal judge extended legal relief to Harvard University, preventing President Trump's administration from blocking international students from entering the country. The U.S. is experiencing growing concerns over environmental contamination, as tests reveal the presence of forever chemicals in CNI and WHAM, with wells on CNMI showing some of the highest contamination levels in the U.S. In international relations, the U.S. is facing scrutiny and competition. New Zealand's Foreign Minister Peters asserted that countries have the right to determine their border control policies, making an indirect comment on the U.S. travel ban. 3 Pacific nations have been included in President Trump's expanded travel ban due to their failure to meet US benchmarks. Supply chain competition between the U.S. and China is intensifying, potentially benefiting several developing countries, particularly those in ASEAN, as manufacturing relocates from China. Despite the U.S. Commerce Secretary's call for foreign investment, Chinese firms are hesitant to invest in the U.S. due to suspicion. Observers are uncertain if momentum from trade talks in London can lead to broader US-China dialogue on issues such as military communications and security. The Chinese Navy is expanding its reach beyond strategic island chains, challenging defensive boundaries previously maintained by the U.S. and its allies in the Western Pacific. President Donald Trump abruptly cut short his G7 summit visit to Canada just minutes after issuing a warning on social media urging the immediate evacuation of Tehran. US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee reported minor damage to the consulate in Israel from the concussion of an Iranian missile, with no injuries. Fiat Tan Nguyen draws parallels between US violence abroad and domestic ICE raids, the Israeli assault on Gaza, and protests within the U.S. Shifting focus to the United Kingdom, the nation has the highest proportion of news avoiders, with 46% of the population actively avoiding news consumption. And finally, in Hong Kong, Meteor's allure is captured in 5 weekend reads. China has urged both Iran and Israel to de-escalate tensions and pursue peaceful resolutions through dialogue. China's international image, historically challenging in the West, may be improving. President Trump's proposition to include China in an expanded G7 summit has spurred discussions on global governance. While a trade agreement offered some respite, new U.S. tariffs on Chinese consumer appliances have created new trade complexities. Beijing has pledged increased support for its property market. China is leveraging its position as a key supplier of rare earth elements, a strategic advantage in global trade. The U.S.-China rivalry is reshaping global supply chains. Indications suggest the Fujian aircraft carrier may soon be commissioned. Baidu is aggressively recruiting AI talent, reflecting intense competition in the field. Though TP-Link laid off most workers at its Shanghai chip unit, the promotion of emerging occupations is an attempt to address youth unemployment. Sohu.com's Charles Jean Perriand advised college students to prioritize work experience. Global warming is expected to worsen ice jams on China's Yellow River. Xi Jinping recently met with Central Asian leaders at a summit. Turning to the United States, new tariffs have been imposed on Chinese consumer appliances, despite a previous trade agreement. A feud has emerged between Donald Trump and Elon Musk over a tax and spending bill. U.S. pharma companies are increasing their investments in China. President Trump has proposed expanding the G7 summit to include Russia and potentially China. Regarding Russia, President Trump's proposal to include Russia in an expanded G7 summit has sparked significant debate among member nations. Finally, Central Asian leaders recently attended a summit with China's Xi Jinping. Japan is currently working on multiple domestic and international issues. The Japanese government is amending laws to tackle exploitative practices in the nightlife sector. This sector often sees women being financially taken advantage of and coerced into sex work after forming relationships with hosts. Japan also faces the social issue of hikikomori, or extreme social withdrawal, and is reviewing support systems for those affected. The Japan Veterinarian Medical Association is advocating for stricter measures against the severe fever with thrombocytopenia syndrome, SFTs, virus. This comes after a veterinarian's death suspected to be caused by animal-to-human transmission. A lawsuit filed against a hospital over an elderly patient's death after swallowing a key has raised concerns about dementia care standards. On the economic front, Sumitomo Mitsui Financial Group and SBI Holdings are creating a joint venture for wealth management services. SoftBank Group is set to raise approximately $4.90 billion through the sale of its shares in T-Mobile US. Regarding international relations, Japan is monitoring suspected drills by Chinese aircraft carriers that appear to be targeting the U.S. This raises security concerns in the region. During a summit, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and U.S. President Donald Trump made limited progress in resolving ongoing tariff disputes. A South Korean leader has communicated a wish for stable relations with Japan. Turning to South Korea, a South Korean leader has publicly stated a desire for stable diplomatic relations with Japan. In other news, Jungkook, a member of the globally recognized K-pop group BTS, issued an apology. The apology was for wearing a cap bearing the slogan, "Make Tokyo Great Again," a phrase that drew criticism for its association with Japan's historical colonial rule over Korea. Russia's ongoing military operations continue to deeply affect Ukraine, exemplified by a recent drone and missile assault on Kyiv that resulted in injuries to at least 20 individuals. Debris from Ukrainian air defenses ignited fires across 2 additional districts within the capital city. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has voiced his opinion that Russia should be reinstated into the G7, arguing that the conflict in Ukraine would not have transpired had Moscow remained a member. Trump specifically pointed to President Putin's alleged resentment following Russia's expulsion after the 2014 annexation of Crimea. Simultaneously, U.S.-Russia relations face challenges as Russia announced the U.S.'s cancellation of planned talks initially agreed upon by both presidents. India is projected to become the world's 3rd largest economy, according to Prime Minister Modi, speaking at a business roundtable in Limassol, Cyprus. Talks with Cyprus are expected to cover its possible involvement in the India-Middle East-Europe trade corridor, an effort to compete with China's Belt and Road Initiative. In trade developments, India will export 150 modern locomotives to Africa in a deal worth over €3,000 crore. An Air India plane crashed shortly after takeoff from Ahmedabad, resulting in multiple deaths. Medical students from Ahmedabad assisted in treating the injured after their hostel was struck by the plane. Vishwash Kumar Ramesh, a British man, was among the survivors. U.S. investigators are at the Ahmedabad crash site and have recovered the cockpit voice recorder. Relatives of the victims, like Rizwan Vara, are demanding answers. The Tata Group, which reacquired Air India in 2022, had been working to improve the airline's image before the crash. France was recently battered by severe thunderstorms, leading to 1 death and 1 injury. Over 30,000 lightning strikes hit the country, with northern France bearing the brunt with 4,326 strikes. Normandy faced powerful winds, peaking at 76 mph. Hailstorms inflicted damage on both infrastructure and crops across multiple regions. Turning to France's diplomatic activities, President Emmanuel Macron asserted a moral duty and political requirement for recognizing a Palestinian state, a declaration that has strained relations with Israel. In a historic move, President Macron also visited Greenland, becoming the first foreign leader to do so since former President Trump's contentious proposal to purchase the island. Expanding its global footprint, France has also forged significant agreements with Papua New Guinea, signaling a noteworthy shift in PM Sheng's geopolitical alliances. Germany witnessed a landmark trial conclude with Ala Musa, a Syrian doctor, receiving a life sentence for crimes against humanity. The 40-year-old was convicted in Frankfurt for murder and torture perpetrated in Syria from 2011 to 2012. His offenses included killing 2 individuals and torturing 9 others across army hospitals and the military intelligence prison in Homs and Damascus. Meanwhile, the German government is actively working to enhance military recruitment by fostering greater public regard for its armed forces. In related news, Martha Cohn, a 105-year-old Jewish nurse and World War II spy for France, has passed away. She bravely infiltrated Germany under the guise of an Aryan, gathering critical Nazi military intelligence and even caring for a wounded SS officer. Globally, Bayern Munich has begun its Club World Cup journey with a notable win. United Kingdom police will now be required to meticulously record the ethnicity and nationality of suspects involved in child sexual abuse and exploitation investigations. In economic news, the UK and the United States have solidified their trade relationship through a newly signed agreement. Turning to the United States, President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK have formalized a trade accord aimed at substantially lowering tariffs on goods exchanged between the 2 nations. Trump specifically noted that the UK would be shielded from tariffs, citing his positive stance on the country. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, President Zelensky recently completed his inaugural visit to Austria since the onset of Russia's full-scale invasion. In a move signaling commitment to the Trump administration, Ukraine is beginning the initial procedures to implement a minerals agreement with the U.S. United States visa restrictions now target foreign officials enabling illegal immigration, as declared by the U.S. Embassy. Business lobbyists are fighting $100 billion in proposed revenge tax legislation on foreign companies. Concerns mount that Trump's trade and tax policies hinder U.S. battery industry growth. A No Kings protest movement advocates for democracy in Guam. The United States is significantly reducing contributions to the United Nations Global Aid Plan. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faced criticism for his carbon tax policy, particularly in light of rising fuel costs. The policy aims to reduce emissions, but has sparked debate over its economic impact on citizens. Canada is also grappling with ongoing discussions regarding Indigenous land rights and reconciliation efforts. These discussions involve negotiations with various indigenous groups regarding land claims and self-governance. In France, President Emmanuel Macron's government is facing scrutiny over its handling of recent protests and social unrest. The protests were sparked by pension reforms and broader concerns about economic inequality. France is also preparing to host the upcoming Olympic Games, with preparations underway to ensure security and infrastructure readiness. Meanwhile, Germany is experiencing debate over its energy policy as it transitions away from nuclear power. The transition raises concerns about energy security and affordability. Germany is also playing a key role in mediating discussions related to the conflict in Ukraine, seeking diplomatic solutions to the crisis. Singapore is facing a growing mental health crisis among its young people, with studies revealing that 25% of those aged 15 to 35 have self-harmed at least once, with teenagers being particularly at risk. Separately, former actor Ian Fang surrendered to authorities and began serving a 40-month prison sentence for engaging in sexual relations with a 15-year-old girl, publicly admitting his guilt. Turning to Malaysia, the government is under mounting pressure to improve the quality of its highways and reduce road fatalities. This comes after a Singaporean cyclist was killed, highlighting the fact that someone dies on Malaysian roads every 2 hours. Ireland has begun the somber task of identifying the remains of almost 800 infants. The location is a former church-run mother and baby home in Tuam, Galway. Historian Catherine Corliss brought to light the names of 796 infants. These infants are believed to be buried on the grounds. Some were allegedly interred in a disused septic tank. The period in question spans from 1925 to 1961. This excavation is a direct response to the mother and baby home scandal that has deeply impacted Ireland. Australia's South Australia is weighing its support for the $30 billion takeover of Santos by an Abu Dhabi-led consortium, prioritizing the state's interests. Meanwhile, in Victoria, Aaron Patterson has denied charges of murder and attempted murder linked to a 2023 beef Wellington lunch, setting the stage for a complex trial. Colombia is in turmoil after Senator and presidential candidate Miguel Uribe Turbay, 39, was shot on June 7 in Bogota during a campaign rally. He is in critical condition after undergoing emergency surgery at the Santa Fe Foundation Hospital. This assassination attempt has triggered widespread concern and urgent appeals for peace, stirring fears of a resurgence of past violence. In West Africa, the expansion of insurgent groups from the Sahel region toward Atlantic coastal nations, such as Ivory Coast, is creating new terrorism hotspots. This expansion has led to the displacement of millions of people, exacerbating humanitarian crises in the region. Moving to South Africa, a poignant memorial consisting of almost 3,000 white crosses stands on a hill. The memorial commemorates white individuals killed on farms over the past 3 decades, raising complex issues of land ownership, racial tensions, and rural security. In the United States, officials are pushing for increased protections for pangolins, advocating for their designation as endangered species. This move aims to combat the illegal trade and protect these unique, scaled mammals from extinction. Tanzania is seeing USAID withdraw from the Hope Through Action project, a $29.50 million initiative managed by the Jane Goodall Institute to protect chimpanzees due to funding cuts. Meanwhile, the main opposition leader in Tanzania has been granted permission to represent himself in his treason trial following disputes over private access to his legal counsel. Nigeria faced renewed violence as gunmen killed 150 people over the weekend. The attacks are part of a long-standing conflict between herders and farmers in the north-central region. Authorities are investigating the incidents and working to restore peace to affected communities. Bangladesh is gearing up for pivotal elections after the ousting of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina amidst widespread protests the previous year. The current interim government has committed to ensuring a transparent and trustworthy election process. However, maintaining stability and public order is a major challenge as the nation heads to the polls. Adding to the political turbulence, the War Crimes Court has directed Sheikh Hasina to appear and face trial on charges of crimes against humanity, further complicating the already tense pre-election environment. Pakistan closed its border with Iran and evacuated 450 Pakistani pilgrims. This action followed escalating tensions between Tehran and Israel involving cross-border strikes. Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar confirmed the evacuation details. The global stage is set for potential intervention as UN rapporteur Michael Fakhri suggests deploying armed and peacekeepers. These peacekeepers would protect aid convoys in conflict zones, including Gaza and Sudan. His proposal aims to prevent starvation, which he argues is being used as a weapon of war. Cambodia is threatening to ban Thai fruits amidst escalating border disputes with Thailand. Shifting focus to Denmark, the nation is currently conducting tests involving a fleet of unmanned robotic sailboats, a move observed amid heightened regional tension. The United States is reportedly increasing pressure on Vietnam to decrease its dependence on Chinese technology. Turning to Malaysia, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has confirmed that the planned reductions in petrol subsidies will proceed as scheduled. In Kenya, the deputy police chief has temporarily resigned from his position to facilitate investigations into the death of a blogger who died while in police custody. Moving to the United States, a Georgia man is facing federal charges for allegedly threatening Senators Ted Cruz and Deb Fischer with sexual violence. In Los Angeles, protests against ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, are posing challenges for the Democratic Party. Tragically, Congo is grappling with devastating floods and boat accidents, resulting in at least 77 confirmed deaths. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM today.